Senator Serville, you want to deal with bicycles?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I think there's a line amendment to this one.
Do you want to do bicycles or you want to do child restraints?
Bicycles is. I think there's a line amendment we need to distribute.
Okay. Is that 1550? Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. We'll suspend for just a minute while people can leave the chamber if they so desire.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 1550. There is a line amendment. Did you say, Senator? Okay, we can have the that line amendment reported to us, please.
There's a line amendment requested by the state police.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, on line 36 of the introduced bill, after vehicle, insert except as provided in sections 46.2-920.1, 46.2-1210, or 46.2-1212.1, as directed by a law enforcement officer, or when the roadway is otherwise impassable due to weather conditions, an accident, or an emergency situation.
Right. So the line amendment, can I explain the line amendment, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
The line amendment has to deal with the second part of the bill having to do with bike lanes. It just makes clear that emergency vehicles or law enforcement vehicles can use the bike lane to pass another car if it's like because of weather or an emergency or an accident. That's all the line amendment does. Otherwise, I can explain the bill now.
Yeah, please explain the bill.
Okay. So this bill was actually, I think it might have been two separate bills last year and the year before. It passed this committee in both bills passed this committee in 2017, I think 8-6. Last year, I think both failed in committee. I've been working with Senator DeSteph on this since then, and I believe he now supports the bill. I'm going to take the bottom part first because that's the simplest part. The first one just makes clear that an automobile cannot use a bicycle lane to pass another car. And the reason it's necessary is because there's some law enforcement agencies advised me that they think there's ambiguity in the code about whether or not you can pass a car on the right if it's paved, even if it's marked for bicycles. And so this just needs to make it crystal clear that only bikes are allowed in the bike lane. Having cars in a bike lane is a real problem. The physics involved are really not good. And if given that bicycles tend to be coming from behind when cars are stopped, when cars tried to go around them, it can create really unsafe situations because a lot of people don't look in their right mirror to go into that bike lane when they go to make that maneuver. And so it's really easy to run into a cyclist in areas where you have lots of cycle traffic. And this is a real problem on one road in my district. And the police have had a hard time enforcing it. And I think we just need to make that part of the code clear. The second piece is the top. And this is what's called a vulnerable user law. I went to a conference, an NCSL conference on vulnerable user laws about 4 years ago, which is where I came up with the idea for this bill. It's been adopted, or versions of this have been adopted in 5 other states. But the problem in Virginia, and if Senator Carrico was here, he and I would have an argument about this, but the problem in Virginia is that the reckless driving statute is completely inadequate for these situations. Commonwealth attorneys are going to stand up and disagree with me. The Alexandria Commonwealth attorney will come and say his organization is wrong. The problem with the reckless driving statute is that there's this case called Powers. And in the Powers case, some guy ran his car at like 100 miles an hour. Nobody saw it happen, but the car was found there was like 1,000 feet of skid marks, and the car went through this field, rolled around, wrapped around a tree, the engine got thrown out. And the Supreme Court of Virginia said, it's great you showed this car that wrecked that was clearly going really fast, but you didn't show how the accident happened. And because you didn't show how the accident happened, you can't convict them of anything. And so in Virginia, if you cannot have a live witness testify to what happened in a collision, you can never convict anyone. And the problem this creates in cyclist and pedestrian cases is that because of the physics involved, when a bicyclist or a pedestrian is struck by a car, most of the time they can't remember what in the world happened because they got concussed and they got knocked out. And all they know is they were walking or cycling. The next thing they woke up in a hospital or they're dead. And so because of the physics involved, it also, there's no marks left on the car. To the extent there's marks left, you can't tell what happened. Whereas with two cars hit each other, it's a lot easier to figure out who was going in what direction, who was blocking who pulled out in front of whoever. But in a cycling or pedestrian situation, you can't. And this puts cyclists and pedestrians or people that are not in automobiles at a severe disadvantage in terms of being prosecuted. And so what this does is it eliminates the reckless driving standard for cases where pedestrians or cyclists get in a serious injury. So I'm not talking about I got a sore back or a sore neck. It has to be a serious injury, which is defined in accordance with the malicious prosecution statute, which requires a really bad injury. And the driver has to be either careless or distracted. And there's plenty of law in Virginia about what careless and distracted is if you read a bunch of cases. The Commonwealth attorneys don't have to ever look at those cases because that's not a standard that appears in the criminal law right now. But on the civil side, it's out there. And so I think the bill is drafted as carefully as we can get it. I think it's needed. Pedestrian and cyclist deaths are way up in Virginia. For the first time in 50 years, we need to do something.
Thank you. Is there anybody here to speak in support of the bill? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Sarah Taylor. I'm with the City of Alexandria, and I am here on behalf of our Commonwealth Attorney as well. He was called away. He was stuck in Senate courts. It does have the support of the City of Alexandria. It does have the support of our Commonwealth Attorney. He has worked with Senator Sorrell on this bill, and we all believe that this fills a gap in current prosecutorial options in that careless driving that results in killing or seriously injuring someone would be a traffic infraction, and today it isn't. The problem is not that we need Commonwealth attorneys who know how to charge reckless driving. The problem is that there is a gap and that reckless driving isn't always warranted in many of these cases because the standard of proof for reckless is much higher, and in that the Commonwealth attorneys must show that the driver willfully intended to be reckless. This bill is intended to address cases where the driver was not willfully reckless, may have been merely careless or distracted, and where that carelessness or distracted nature kills or seriously injures someone. It's something that we see in our community far too often. It's something that we have had advocates come to us and want us to work on, and we're grateful to Senator Sorrell for bringing this and ask for your support for this legislation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Champ Early, I'm president of the Virginia Bicycling Federation. We strongly support this bill. As Senator Sorrell said, we've seen a number of cases where bicyclists literally die, and a driver says, well, I didn't see him. They don't even get a traffic ticket, and we hope that this gives the Commonwealth attorneys some additional tools to do what's right. So we would ask you to vote in favor of the bill.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else speak in support? And those in opposition? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm Tracy Quackenbush Martin on behalf of the Virginia Association of Commonwealth Attorneys. I'm the Commonwealth Attorney in Halifax County. VACA opposes this bill for a couple of different reasons. Number one, there's a concern that there's an attempt to criminalize what would otherwise be a negligence per se standard for behavior out on the road. In other words, if it's not reckless driving, then it shouldn't be criminalized or something that's quasi-criminal. Number two, there's a concern also of injection of terms that are not defined within criminal law, as Senator Sorrell so aptly pointed out. We couldn't tell you from our case law what careless driving means, and so forth. So that's an additional concern. And then finally, and this is really a new thing that didn't come up last year, and that's the addition of subsection C that would preclude prosecution for reckless driving, for criminal behavior. If this traffic citation came through, it would preclude that from going forward, which was perhaps the most harmful, I think, in terms of the impact on potential victims in the case.
All right. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to speak to the bill? I have a question for State Police. Mr. Maxey, it's good to see you again. How are you?
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Ron Maxey, Virginia State Police.
Have you seen the body of the bill, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm a little, well, I'm uninformed, let's put it that way. Now, we're talking about people being on a roadway with skates, inline skates, skateboard, foot scooter. Are all of those things legally allowed on the roadways in Virginia?
Well, it depends on the type of roadway, if it's limited access, if it's streets, highways, depends on how local ordinances will come into play.
Not interstates.
Correct. Not limited. obviously limited access roads, they would not be allowed.
It's like interstates, not allowed.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Hold on a second. Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing, this bill has crept into my brain over the years as a biker and a driver, and when the only concern I have, and I'm supportive of this effort, we need to share the roadways, but usually when you're making a right-hand turn, you don't worry about looking in your rearview mirror to make a right-hand turn. And in this circumstances, just here in the city of Richmond, I've seen situations where I would become a little nervous about making a right-hand turn without taking my eyes off the road to look in the rearview mirror, because I'm sort of going to be kind of cutting across a little bit of that bike path to make that right-hand turn. I'm not passing anybody, I'm not doing anything, but it puts you in that situation.
Yep.
And that's maybe more of a problem with bike lanes, in particular, but I would hate to be held responsible making a lawful right-hand turn, having a bike run into the right-hand side of my car, and I wasn't passing anybody. Would I be held liable in that kind of a situation?
Well, Mr. Chairman, so two things on that. Number one is, you remember we went through this exact discussion with regard to the Doring bill about 3 years ago, I think, when we finally passed it. I think it was actually Senator Peterson's bill, if I'm not mistaken. But because a lot of people don't look in their mirror before they open their door and take out a cyclist. And so we created that standard so that drivers do have a responsibility to look in their side view mirror, look out before they open their door now. With regard to bike lanes, the bike lanes I've seen are all striped in a way so that every time there is a place for a legal right-hand turn, there's a dotted line, at least for roads. There's a dotted line to indicate you're allowed to go into the bike lane to get to where you need to make that right-hand turn. So with all things new, these bike lanes are proliferating. With all things new, I think there's going to be driver behavior changes that are needed, and this tweak to this statute is part of that.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Senator Marsden.
Would that include, do you see those dotted lines where somebody's turning into a driveway or an alleyway?
No.
So I would have to check my rear view mirror, even though I'm in the right lane, I'm going to have to check my rear view mirror before I make a right-hand turn to go into an alleyway.
Yeah, and I think that's, well, alleys probably have the dotted lines, but driveways don't, and I don't think this bill would change that issue. I mean, bike lanes already exist. They're striping them all over Northern Virginia, they're all over Richmond, a lot of college towns, they already have them. So this issue, the issue you raise, I think already exists. I don't think this statute is about passing on the right as opposed to making a lawful right-hand turn.
So that'd be good.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Right.
I have a question.
Senator Edwards.
The write-up in the cheat sheet says it's an infraction, and I'm assuming the category that is under 46.2, whatever, is infraction.
800, yeah.
Huh? Where does it? What point in the code does it say this is an infraction, and what's the fine?
Fine is, I think, either up to $250 or $500 for an infraction. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's in 46.2, 800 somewhere.
Okay, all right.
Oh, please, we got an answer.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Edwards, the relevant provisions you're asking about are in 46.2-113, which says that any violation of the title is punishable as a traffic infraction with a fine up to $250.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
There, and they got an answer. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Senator McClellan.
Thank you. I have just want to be sure, as I read lines 35 and 36, it is only if the bike lane has a solid line that the car could not pass. So, for example, here in the city on Franklin, they have turned what used to be a traffic lane into a bike lane that is also a floating parking lane, but it still has the dotted line instead of a solid line. So under your bill, you could still pass on Franklin as long as there are no cars parked there, obviously, when it's a parking lane. You could still do that under your bill, right?
Right, because this says it's cross a solid line.
Okay, and second, I think this is covered, but am I correct that under your definition of a vulnerable road user, that would include the bird scooters? Is that a electric personal?
I think that's a foot scooter.
Well, they're
or
not
an electric.
They're not foot scooters.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking, because you don't use your foot on it. It's a motorized. It looks just like a foot scooter, but it has a motor.
You know, I hesitate to answer that because there are so many defined devices in 46.2100. It wouldn't have surprised me if we had added one or two since this was first drafted and I missed one, but I can look at that and figure it out. But it could fall within the electric personal assistive mobility device or the electric power. It's not an electric power assisted bicycle, I don't think. So, but I don't know. We tend to create new categories for things when they pop up, like segways and things.
Can I ask, Trooper Maxey, can you maybe help us out here with that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Ron Maxey, State Police. To answer the question, just related to some other legislation going through right now, there is no clear definition in code. I think they're working to create a definition that would be applicable to those devices. Yeah. But at this time, they do not fall into the categories that are currently under 462100.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on the bill? Oh, the chairman's back. Thank gosh. Oh, gosh. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the Senator Serval's annual everything on the road bill.
I understand.
Okay.
I know how to vote. You just keep going.
Okay. All right. We've heard the bill. If a motion's in order, somebody make one. Oh, yes, sir.
Adopt amendment.
Oh, we have to adopt the amendment. Is there a motion on the amendment?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the amendment as presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay. The amended bill is now before us. Yes.
Move to report.
All right. Senator Dees moves to report. Senator Dees moves to
second.
Oh, okay, there you go. All right, any other discussion? All right, hearing none, please vote on the voting machine.
D-Steph told me he was a yes.
Well, I'm going to abstain for him just because he's not here. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second.
He told me he left instructions.
I'm just telling you, he's not here. And excuse me,
Okay.
Destroy that roll,
Okay.
please. Destroy the roll, please. And we're going to try this again. These proxy things. All right, all those in favor, please vote aye. No. Okay.
6 ayes, 6 nays, 1 abstention.
Okay. All right, the bill fails to pass. So you may want to take that up with the chairman. If I just don't know about Senator D. Steph. I have his proxy. He did not instruct me one way or the other.
Bring it back next.
I'll go.